Think we're good. Okay. Now we're streaming. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Technology. Just when you think you're getting better, you're not. Or at least I'm not. Okay. All right, everybody. I think that we are live on Facebook. I hope that we are live on Facebook. I have done my best to ensure that we are live on Facebook, even if we're not quite live the way we anticipated being. Okay. So let me just, all right. We are live, but not where we intended to be. So I have friends helping us out live. Who will send anyone who's on the event page over to here. Maybe someone has found us already. So here we sit. Okay. And okay. So ladies, here we are. I feel like we're just continuing our conversation that we've been having, but we're going to make it a little more formal now. All right, so introductions. I'm going to start with me and then I'm going to move on to you guys, okay? So welcome to anyone who's joining us on Facebook, and hopefully you guys will be trickling over from wherever you're found on this vast internet of ours. I'm Elizabeth Grady Harper. The executive director of the Boston Faith and Justice Network. And if you're not familiar with what we do, we work to bring Christians together around ideas of justice and generosity, considering how can we live more simply and generously to make the world a more just place. And this is our 5th uncomfortable conversation in the series that we started in July. And we started it with these amazing women you see before you. This was our first uncomfortable conversation. And we envisioned the series as a way to bring people together who would bring their wisdom, their experience, their education, and help us to engage in conversations that are maybe things that we might want to avoid, things that are maybe difficult to talk about, but are important if we are serious about engaging in the work of justice in the world, if we're serious about engaging our call to be doers of justice. And so we have sort of come full circle to engage in the conversation that started this, which was a conversation around racism, bias, and prejudice. So we're going to talk about that tonight, about how we can continue the work of being doers of justice in that area, in our personal lives, in our communities, and in our churches. And I'm going to let our panel introduce themselves, but before I do that, and they explain, what brought them here then and now, however they want to share that, I'm going to frame the conversation for us a little bit. So it's interesting, providential, that we are talking about this tonight, this week, because when we talked about it in July, we were, as a country, in the midst of a lot of unrest around this idea of racism. The murder of George Floyd had happened recently. The country was protesting about the systems in our country that reveal our racist past, that reveal our racist present. And people were rising up and talking about it in a way that we hadn't in recent memory. And so it was a timely topic, and we wanted to talk about it in a way that maybe we hadn't before. And some people continue to talk about it, but in that conversation we had, that was an event of Boston Faith and Justice that had more people attending, because we were in the middle of a pandemic, we were online, than any other event, because it was something that people were really interested in talking about. And that's not a judgment statement. And we were so glad that people were interested in talking about it. But as I'll share, the interest in that topic has waned. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about, why that is and how that is. Because now this week, Derek Chauvin, the murderer of George Floyd, is on trial. And we're once again confronted with that event from last May. And I don't know if anyone's watching it, but I think there's an element of re-traumatization for the communities and understanding of what happened. And so just thinking about that, and we're also going to talk about the rise of anti-Asian violence. And I don't know if anyone, if you're on Twitter, if you're on any kind of social media, or even just turning on your television, there have been different videos that have confronted us with specific instances of anti-Asian violence just this week, never mind what happened a week and a half ago in Atlanta. And so we're confronted with this rise of anti-Asian violence. And there's that question of, is it a rise of anti-Asian violence, or are we just being confronted with a truth that has existed since Asians have been present in the United States? And now we're being confronted with it in ways that we haven't looked at it before. So I just want to share with you a couple quotes from people who are wiser than me and give a little context. And I promise that I will be doing much less talking, because these women have much better things to say and stories to share and better ways to say them than I do. So to start, I want to share this from an interview with Brian Stevenson with the Washington Post from a few months ago. And what he says is, what I think we saw last summer is that with the continued indifference to the victimization of Black people by police violence, the disparities, that we saw during the pandemic, all of these things just made it clear that if we keep doing what we've been doing for 400 years, if we stay silent as we have been taught, then this problem will continue generation after generation. I think what a lot of people said is that we don't want to do that anymore. And that is the beginning of creating a space for actual reckoning. It's not the reckoning itself, but it creates that space. And I'm hopeful that millions more Americans have come to accept that we have to talk about these things differently. We have to do some things differently if we want to get free from this long history of racial injustice. He shared his hope, and other leaders of color have shared their hope that this reckoning might be different. It may represent real progress. And we're here and hopeful that that is. But some statistics that follow that, people who do these things that collect data from almost immediately after, in June, 45% of white Americans said that racism was a big and real problem, which, first of all, 45%, like what? But that was an uptick, 45%. But just from June to August, it was down to 33%. So that spotlight caused people to think, yes, this is a real problem. White Americans, I don't want to say people, white Americans, to say, oh, wait a second, this is a problem. But then it went down to 33%. And it actually, a lot of data suggests that it has gone down even further. And so this article that talked about this data, which we'll be sharing in the chat if you're interested in looking it up, says the decline in public opinion is consistent with a long line of political science research that tells us that the effects of events on public opinion tend to only last as long as they are at the forefront of the country's, or in this case, one group, white America's, collective consciousness. That also means without prolonged activism and sustained media attention, the impact of this year's protests on white public opinion could evaporate entirely. And so we're here to consider, is that what happened? And then moving on to just the consideration of anti-Asian violence, we think about what happened on March 16th, and we just grieve with the AAPI community. A mass shooter took the lives of 6 women of Asian descent, of 8 people, injuring 2 others. And it again put a spotlight on something that has been present for so long, and specifically since our former president started naming a pandemic after a group of people and gave people permission to do violence, to discriminate, to call out a group of people. And then we have the specific acts of violence that we've seen just yesterday and today. And we think, what is going on in this country? Anti-Asian hate crimes have spiked 150% since the beginning of the pandemic, according to a recent study. And again, we'll put that link in the chat too, if you're interested in seeing that. So we're here to ask ourselves, how can we be allies in combating these injustices? And we want to talk about these things. We want to consider them. We think conversation is important. And we also want to consider what actions we can be taking. So that is why I have invited these amazing women here to talk to us. So I would want to invite each of you guys to just introduce yourselves and whatever you want to share with us about you and why you're here and why you think this conversation is important and why you want to take part. So I'll just invite Jess to start us off.
Hi everyone, my name is Jessica Lim. I am married to my husband Cliff for 18 years this year. We're parents to 2 daughters, a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. And I'm just honored to be here to be in conversation with these wonderful women and with all of you online as well, because I just think this is so important. I kind of started on this journey myself a couple years ago as I was trying to just confront some bondages and patterns that I've seen in my own life, and was wrestling those things with God. I really came to kind of a crossroads in my faith where I stripped everything down and I went right to the Gospels to say, Jesus, what do you believe about me? What do you believe? Who are you? And what does your kingdom stand for? And as I went to the Gospels, I just saw that Jesus was about justice. Jesus' ministry was for the oppressed, for the marginalized. And this was his kingdom. And if I am to be a follower of Jesus, then I need to care about these things. So that's kind of when I started to really try to educate myself, and friends like Elizabeth who have come alongside me to teach me, to share resources with me, read books with me, have all been so helpful in helping me along this journey. And this is just another step in that journey for me here today.
Thanks, Jess. Kathy?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name's Kathy LaFlash. Along with my husband, we're empty nesters. Our son's a junior in college. We've been married for 37 years and been blessed with so many gifts. And again, I've served on this panel back last summer, which really seems like a lifetime ago, especially when we're reliving all the events through the trial this week. But, I wanted to be part of that panel because I really felt like I just didn't know. I just was a bystander, and I just didn't know what was going on and why it was going on. So I needed to jump in the deep end and learn a lot, which I think I've done a lot of learning in the last however many months. So I wanted to be part of this follow-up panel just to be held accountable for the work that we are called to do. I'm involved in the labor movement, so I have an opportunity to have a lot of influence in my job and run into tons of different people. So I just want to be able to use that influence, and I wanted to have that knowledge to be able to pass that on. The listening, like Jess, mentioned, we're coming alongside each other. We have this group of people that are just talking and listening and asking questions and having, the cliche uncomfortable conversations. The learning that we're obligated to do, to be part of this space that we've called to be part of. It's not something that I just know that I've been involved in things that I've just felt in the past, like this is not my thing, but I just know God has placed me for a time such as this. My feet are firmly planted in learning, growing, listening, and communicating, and just not being a bystander, just, using my voice, using the influence, using my words and my actions, and just like Jess said, using what Jesus taught us and how we use that to continue this dialogue and make some real hardened change, and have some hard conversations with people that literally have walked away from me in the last few months because they don't want to hear it. People that I love dearly. So it's a hard place to be, but it's an important place to be. So I'm thankful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Lindsay?
Thank you. My name is Lindsay Kaleli. I live here with my husband, Joseph Kaleli, who is from Milford. I am originally from Atlanta, grew up in Jasper, Alabama, and excited about being a part of this community. I have 3 beautiful children, a 1-year-old, 5-year-old, and soon to be 8-year-old. And this conversation is important to me mainly because of my children and being in general, but especially being in a predominantly white community. When I was 10 years old, and I said this before, so excuse me if you're hearing this story again, but when I was 10 years old, I experienced racism for the first time. And I didn't know how to have the conversation or how to handle it. And I was very upset with myself about being upset and feeling like I couldn't stand up for myself. And so I think it's important for them to know how to have this conversation, and the community that they're a part of to be comfortable with having this conversation. And so this is the main reason why I'm here today. And I also think it's a conversation that needs to continue to happen. I've been a part of a lot of conversations where people have had the conversation and think that that's enough, or they've been a part of a book club and they think that that's enough. And I think it's important for people to see that it's a never-ending cycle. Will forever be an important conversation, so that we can attain equity and equality for all, but also maintain it. So that's why I'm here.
Great. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Lindsay. And just let me say again how thankful I am for each of you guys. Just gonna being here and sharing and just letting us benefit from your experiences and your wisdom. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation. So I'm going to start with Jess. And can you share about your experiences and thoughts in light of, and again, I'm so hesitant to call it the rise in anti-Asian violence, because I just, again, feel like it's more of a spotlight that we're now seeing it more clearly, but, and the enabling of this sentiment that seems to have been unleashed in our culture. Can you share a little bit about your experience and just what that has or hasn't made you think about with you, and what you've been going through, what you're willing to share and able to give us your thoughts on that?
Sure. So, like most Asian Americans, I certainly have been on an emotional roller coaster this past year, especially the past few weeks. And the surge or the awareness of the number of incidents of anti-Asian attacks this past year has really been disturbing. And I definitely believe it's directly related to the words and the sentiments of people in power who have attached Asian identity with the coronavirus and have given permission for people to scapegoat Asians for the global pandemic. Words do matter. But I want to be clear about one thing, and it's that these sentiments, this racism has been alive and well, kind of what Elizabeth has been mentioning. It's been alive and well long before Trump ever became president. Just Google Vincent Chen, read about the Japanese internment camps or the Chinese Exclusion Act. This has been going on, and it's been deep for years. So it's not anything new, and we can't scapegoat Trump for it, because I've heard that response as well. Like, oh, 400 years of progress and then it's ruined by, Trump. And, as much as I don't like Trump personally, but I can't scapegoat him for what he's not responsible for either. So that wouldn't be fair. But definitely, just the awareness of these acts in the past year has really been heartbreaking. I'll share a few stories. The superintendent of our school district recently shared in a letter addressing the shooting in Georgia that when her colleague went to Gillette Stadium, for those who aren't in Massachusetts, Gillette Stadium is one of our mass vaccination sites for the COVID vaccine. The superintendent's colleague went to get her vaccine, and the vaccinating nurse whispered in her ear, "We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the Chinese." That broke my heart. So that happens. The mass shooting in Georgia, where Asian women were targeted, many of them immigrants, single moms working to provide for their families, that broke my heart. The video that Elizabeth alluded to that I just watched this morning of a 65-year-old woman who was walking to church this past Sunday, got kicked in the stomach, knocked to the ground on the sidewalk by a man who repeatedly punched and kicked her while saying, "Get the F out of here, you don't belong here," while two security guards watched and did nothing. And then one even just shut the door without even offering her any sort of help at all. That broke my heart. Some positive responses I've seen as a result of these incidences and the awareness of these incidents it's been powerful to see my Asian American community stand up in solidarity against Asian hate in our country. It's powerful because culturally, we've been raised by our parents to put our heads down, to work hard, to not cause a scene. But also the pain that we experience as Asian Americans in this country is the pain of being invisible. We're often just, seen as a perpetual foreigner, or, just, they work hard, but they can't, you know, they'll never be at the top, or, you know, it's just, we're always just invisible, it seems. So it's been powerful to see, you know, the group of us as a community be loud and collective and stand and just cry out to finally be seen, to stand up for ourselves. So that has been powerful. But the other thing that has been powerful for me is just, you know, a lot of friends, especially after the incident in Georgia happened, you know, reached out to me after, and just to check in on me, which I really appreciated. But the first people to do that, I noticed, were my African American friends, and it really humbled me. My Black friends reached out to me instinctively, just to say, hey, are you okay? Just wanted you to know that I'm standing in solidarity with you, and I share your sorrows, and I stand against all this hate with you. And you know, that meant so much to me, and at the same time, it broke me. And the reason why it broke me is because I realized that they instinctively knew to reach out to me before I posted anything on social media or anything, because they firsthand knew this pain, they knew this fear, they knew this anger, they knew this disbelief when injustices occur and you hear people spin stories and victim blame. They know what it feels like when, you know, if the tables were turned and a white man was a victim and a minority was a perpetrator, things would be different. Having a bad day wouldn't be an acceptable excuse. They instinctively empathized with me, and they loved me by reaching out in solidarity. And it really caused me to grieve and lament all the times I didn't reach out to them when they were in that position, when they continually are in that position. And and all the ways that I've failed to hear their pain in those moments and stand in solidarity with them. You know, the supportive words of everyone mean something. They're a nice gesture, but what I need is the empathy that drives the action to bring about change. That's what I need. You know, like the most vulnerable in my community are being attacked: women, elderly, immigrants. And I worry and fear for my parents when they go to the grocery store. A simple thing is going to the grocery store. I fear for them because there's a strong possibility that they may be victimized just because of their race, because of what they look like. With their sunglasses on, with their mask on, they still look Asian. And that is enough to get them beat up and possibly murdered. So I don't, you know, and I'm guilty of this myself, you know, like the words, the placating words of just saying, I'm so sorry, we stand against this hate, the hashtags, they're just not enough anymore. Like what we need is change. We need to get at the root of why these things happen. Because at the end of the day, you know, Asians being attacked in this country is the same reason why George Floyd was murdered. It's the same reason why the mass shootings at King Sooper in Colorado happened. It's the same. The root issue, the root cause is the same. And we all should be sick and tired of it and just go for the root cause. And I think Trevor Noah summed it up perfectly for me when he said in his daily Instagram live after the after the Georgia shooting, he said, quote, "Why are people so invested in solving the symptoms instead of the cause? America does this time and time again. It's a country that wants to fight the symptoms and not the underlying conditions that cause those symptoms to take effect. Racism, misogyny, gun violence, and mental health." You know, I just feel like that just sums it up. It's time that we stop just, you know, trying to get at the symptoms. Like, another thing that really bothers me is how, you know, people will point out, well, a lot of the violence against Asian is actually being done or perpetrated by other minority groups. And again, that is just a symptom of the cause. It's not that minority groups are inherently bad and they're attacking other minority groups, so the problem is solved by just those people just need to fix themselves, so it's no longer a white problem. No, that is so not true. The root issue is that minority groups are being pinned against each other for white supremacy, if I can say it bluntly. So we need to be able to recognize that. We need to own up to the truth, and we need to address the cause. And And that's why I feel like we can't waste any more time just responding with words and platitudes. We really need to come together, as my friends have said earlier. We need to come together as people, as communities, and I feel so strongly about this, as churches, and call things out for what they are so change can actually occur.
Jess, that was so much and so good. Thank you for all of that. Thank you. Yeah. I just want to point out, because I think everything you guys say might raise some people wanting to do follow-ups. If you guys have questions, you can put them in the chat there on Facebook, and we'll try to get to them towards the end. So just wanted to say that, because I didn't say that earlier. Kathy, I wanted to go to you next. You and I are similarly situated. We are white women in a white evangelical world. That's where we have chosen to, that's our chosen community. And we have watched our community respond to what's going on in our world. Some of that response has been heartening. Some of it has been heartbreaking. And I just wanted to ask you what you've thought of what's going on within our community, and what you see your role as within that community.
Yeah, just to kind of bounce off what Jess just said, what's the root? Because I know I have these like poison ivy, huge poison ivy around my yard. And every year they come up and, you touch them, and next thing you know, you're covered in poison ivy. But if you don't pull the root down, it's just going to keep growing. And we need to recognize, and I think, the Bible brings us right to that point of how we recognize what the problem is, what the root problem is. It's sin. It's sin. And we all have that brokenness. I am not judging, because trust me, I literally have learned so much in the last year. It's been scary to think the world that I've lived in and the thoughts and ideals that I've had for the long years that I've been on this earth. So definitely recognizing the root cause is sin. But knowing that there's an opportunity for us to grow, learn, and grow, and find out, and I know, like the scripture that says, about the plank in my own eye, not recognizing the plank in someone else's eye, but recognizing that it's in my own eye. So, I think there's that transparency and recognizing that, like, I need to say, like, I didn't understand what Jim Crow was. I literally had no idea in this time last year. I just needed to start learning and finding out and calling it out. I think, as leaders in the church, in the evangelical church, we have an opportunity, because we have the Great Commission. The Lord's called us to the Great Commission. So we should be doing that all the time. And we have that opportunity to just talk to other people and say, you know what, this is how I felt. This is what I didn't understand. This is the world that I've lived in. And this is what I did as a result of it, and the experiences that I've had, and just the listening and just being aware, like Jess said, like, until you walk a day in someone's shoes, you have no idea what they've gone through. And, we've gone through other things in our lives. And the scripture says, like, that we can comfort others because he comforted us first. So I think we just need to say what it is, and be honest, and be open, be truthful, and not judgmental. I think there's a huge divide, a big split in the church. I've seen it in the last few months. I think people, like Elizabeth said when she opened up the discussion, is, oh, that was last summer's issue, like, or that was 3 months ago. Like, we have other things that we need to talk about. Like, I'm sick of talking about that. No, it's been here forever, and it's not going to go away unless we call it what it is. So, and not everybody is called to be a leader. And I get that. Like, we have this opportunity to lead. So, just having the dialogue, read a lot of books, done a lot of book groups with church people, church friends, had a lot of surprises by conversations that I've had, but gentle, like trying to understand, because I think that was me at some point too. So just, the transparency again, and just not the don't ask, don't tell, because that's always bothered me, is people like, well, let's just forget about that conversation because that's the way they are. Well, that's not acceptable. So I just think it's just that opportunity to be prayerful and to be in the moment, and just trust the Holy Spirit's going to use us in a mighty way. And sometimes it's just being quiet and then calling somebody afterwards and saying, I'd really like to follow up on that conversation and what you said and why you said it. So I think it's just the learning that we're always doing this side of heaven. We're never going to stop learning. My grandfather used to say it's a bad day when we don't learn something new. So I just think that we need to learn something and do something with it using our words, because like Jess said, words matter, hugely matter, and our actions then on top of it. So, just keeping the dialogue going and just recognizing, we're broken people. We're all broken people, but God's going to use us in a mighty way. So we just have to come together and love and support one another and just move forward as best we can.
Thank you for that. Lindsay, I want to ask you, since we spoke in July, what progress do you feel like we've seen toward racial justice, and where do you see setbacks? What work has been done and what work needs to still be done?
Okay, excuse the background noise. But as far as progress, I know as far as the end of last year, there was over a 7,000% increase in Black-owned business support, and people are still finding ways to support Black businesses. I know a lot of people have been ordering furniture online using Black, buying from Black-owned retail stores, also ordering from Etsy, Black-owned businesses on Etsy. So people are continuing to find creative ways to support Black businesses. Also last year, Southern Black voters made history at the polls. So, that was progress. Schools are implementing a multicultural approach in their classrooms. My daughter's school, for instance, did a heritage project, which where all the students brought a piece of their heritage that they wanted to learn about. And with that, they were able to learn about a part of their heritage, but then also a part of their classmates' heritage. And she also introduced her own things, like she taught them how to write. I don't know if I'm saying this because how to write in Mandarin or write in Chinese. So she brought like so many cool things into the classroom. And so schools are trying to do that more. And schools, like schools in our area, are trying to hire people who are experts on inclusion to educate the teachers and to support their students of color in their classrooms, and to also teach them how to have a more color inclusive curriculum. And then since people have been able to witness what happens in our country through the news, they finally are aware of racism and aware that it's still a problem. So I'm gonna pause there. That's as far as the progress. 1 second. As far as setbacks, along the lines that I just said, people being able to see what's happening in our country, you would think that because people have seen the awful things happening in the news, people who would identify as white supremacists or who are unaware of their white privilege would be convicted and have a change of heart. But some people, like you saw with the incident at the Capitol, have been emboldened by it. And, so that for me, that has been one of the most heartbreaking things, that it's up front in your face, it's everywhere. And still some people haven't had a change of heart. And so much that I had to take a break from social media because of the comments and the victim blaming, as Jess said. So that's one. And then I've also been a part of several conversations where people feel guilty, like they have to give something up to help their BIPOC brothers and sisters. And they don't want to because they work so hard to get what they have, their success and where they are. And then a lot of people in New England especially are not children or descendants of slave owners. Their parents and ancestors were immigrants as well, so they came here with nothing and have had to work very hard to get to where they've gotten. So they're very proud of that and don't want to give up their hard work, and because of that are unable to see that the huge advantage that they still have had over their Black brothers and sisters, BIPOC brothers and sisters. And also, some people don't realize that there's privilege also. A part of white privilege is the privilege of identity, and being able to take your last name and connect it back to, you know, your ancestors in Europe or wherever. Whereas someone like me, my maiden name, McWhorter, connects back to a slave owner in Griffin, Georgia. You know, it doesn't connect back. So there's a sense of pride of being able to connect your identity back to, you know, your original or close to your original ancestors. And so I think people are unable to see those disadvantages. Also, setbacks are not taking things so personally. I think that where I kind of hit a wall in a lot of these conversations is that people think because I have these biases, or because because if I were to admit that I have a bias, and then it's admitting that something's wrong with me, or, you know, accepting or that I am racist. But I think that we have to kind of not think of it that way. It's more so an opportunity for growth, and to have more of a Christ mentality of opening our hearts to this, so that we can love one another like we should be loved. Sorry, I'm trying, there's a lot of background noise, I'm trying to stay focused, is the Black white mentality. So I feel like a lot of people see what some people are doing to bring about change, and because that is so far from who they are as people, or so far from what they can envision themselves doing, they say, well, that's not me, I can't do that. Like, I can't get up and be a panelist on a panel, or I can't organize a march. And I think because of that, a lot of people are not taking the steps to do their part. And so I think that kind of is causing a little bit of a lag in people progressing and moving forward and taking steps towards a change. Also, the I or have arrived mentality for those who have done something, who have supported businesses, Black-owned businesses, who have been a part of panels, who have reached out to people. Once they've done that thing, that they've done what they're supposed to have done. And so I think, like I mentioned before, it's an ongoing thing, and we have to continue to not make it a moment. And then, sorry, I have a lot of little points that kind of, when I'm trying to make sure I hit them all. But people don't want to lose their comfort. So with a lot of my circles of friends, people want to have a good time. They want to laugh. Life is hard in general. So people, when they get together, want to unwind, relax, and laugh. And this conversation, it's a heavy conversation. The work is backbreaking work. And so I think people are afraid of that, afraid of the weight that it requires, afraid of the work. But I think that if we all do our part, if every single person does their part, I think it won't be as backbreaking. It's going to be backbreaking work for a very long time. And then lastly, for me, the setback, or where I have struggled the most, is in a Christian community. So I think our church has done a really great job at continue to put the issue of racism at the forefront, or at least trying to. But I've also seen a lot of Christians who still think that it's a political issue and not an issue of humanity. And so I think that is one of the most detrimental things that has happened from this whole year, is still with seeing everything that's happened. There are some people who are still in that place, and it looks bad for the Christian community, and a lot of people have taken a step back from Christianity because of that. So yes, those are my thoughts.
You guys are educating me. This is like so much good stuff from all of you. There's just a lot in there. There's a lot to unpack. So I want to, that was just so good. I want to put that last question that Lindsay just sort of took us to school on, about where we've come since May and then July when we talked. Where you guys, so Jess and Kathy, you guys can, I'll start with Jess just so we have some order, but like where you see us, kind of that same question, where you feel like we've made some progress, and maybe where you're sort of seeing, I don't, for lack of a better term, a relapse, and where you wish we hadn't kind of not gone backwards. And so I just kind of want to get your take on that as well, Jess and Kathy. So Jess.
Well, I think I agree with a lot. Well, I might just be repeating what Lindsay just said because she said so much. It was also good. I'm learning as well. But definitely, I think we've made progress as churches to bring up the topic. But a group of us recently read the book by Jemar Tisby, How to Fight Racism. Am I messing up the name? How to Fight Racism. But and he states that, I'm losing my train of thought now. But we can have ghost documents. We can have these declarations that we stand against racial injustices. We make the statement, but then it just becomes a ghost document on the website, and it just kind of doesn't have any substance to it. It's the words, they're just floating out there. So I think we've made that progress to say that we need to have that document, but I hope that it doesn't become a ghost document in many of these churches that have taken a stand against racial injustice. And the ways that I feel like we've taken a step back are kind of like going back to what happened on January 6th. It was especially heartbreaking for me to see the images of Christians storming the Capitol with a cross saying, with Jesus's name attached to it, with Trump's name and a noose. It really just broke me to see those images. And if that's what Christianity has come to represent, then we have taken a huge step backwards, and that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, thank you. And Kathy, do you have thoughts on that, on the ways in which we've maybe continued to move forward and other ways that we've maybe gone backwards?
Yeah, that just have to take a breath now, because those images just keep playing in my head. And I even think like the whole Second Amendment thing, that it's a God-given right for someone to have an AR-15. Like, so it just seems like every chance we as society get, we will use the tag word God or Jesus and use it wrongly. And I just think it's that whole idea of like how we gently call people out, or maybe not so gently. I think we just have to, I just think we need to be in the Word, because Jesus gives us so many examples of what he does. and bad circumstances and how he addresses it. So I think we just need to be in the Word. I love people, and I just miss being away from people. So I'm anxious for the opportunities to get together with people beyond Zoom, because that's when you can have the real heart-to-heart dialogues. And I think, even if it's just having a couple of friends over for dinner, or, going for a walk with somebody and having those conversations, those uncomfortable conversations, and just, like starting the conversation in a small way, not like in a huge way, but just in a small way, like, how did you respond to that? And what did you think of? And just listening. And I think that's the key of listening, because let's face it, I'm just one of those people that says, I've already got my mind made up, and when I'm listening, I maybe want to listen to get my thoughts in there and hoping to sway that person. But I think it's just that idea of listening to, and just, reading and listening to podcasts, and just listening to the struggles of people. And I heard this beautiful quote from St. Augustine. It says, "Hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger is the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are." And I think we need to recognize that we have that anger, and God has given us that anger for a reason, and we have to have the courage to respond to that anger. And the courage could be different for everyone. All of us here on the panel all have different gifts. And I hearken back to Rick Warren saying years ago, the man that would come and sharpen the pencils at Saddleback Church, his role was just as important as Rick Warren sharing the gospel. Somebody could write out their prayer request or write notes or do something, but they needed that pencil to be sharpened. So we all have gifts. We have, God's given us these gifts, and we have to use them. And some of us may be the voice on the panel. Someone else might be writing the letters or holding the signs or doing whatever needs to be done, and just going and loving on the people that are being hurt, and listening. I think that's the big word for the year, is listening.
Awesome. Thank you. And that's a great segue to a follow-up question of what is an important and meaningful step that people can take to bring about racial equity. And I think what we've been talking about, sort of a theme of this conversation and just its very existence, is recognizing that this is long and hard work, and we want to be in it for the long haul. And just, again, recognizing this is, I think, not in this conversation, but the conversation we had before we actually started. But I try to constantly recognize, like, in this work, like, my privilege of being able to pick it up and put it down, right? Just because I'm white, and I can walk away from this, and I'm trying to be someone who doesn't do that, who stays in this work, and trying to be like, what does that look like? What does it look like to stay in this work, and to not be an in and out, to not be a fair weather friend, for lack of a better term. And so what are the ways in which we can do the sustaining work of bringing about racial equity? And so, Lindsay, I'll start with you. And again, I'm not looking for you to solve this problem. I recognize that that is a large question, and you've already kind of brought us some stuff just in the context of this conversation. But is there something that you look to and are like, this is a direction we should head, or this is some things we should be thinking about?
I think bringing people in our circles, family, work, as hard as it may be, communities, different circles of friends. I know I have like a bunch of different ones, from theater to church to Joe's high school, college, so many different circles to the conversation. And it's especially hard, I think, for people who have people who they know are more on the racist, bias, white supremacist side. So that I know that is a difficult ask, but I think that getting people to find a way to empathize, and I think that is huge. And I didn't realize how hard empathy actually is for people, but if people can find a way in to empathizing, I think that is one of the biggest steps. And I won't articulate it as well as you did, Kathy, but I think the grace from all sides. One of the reasons that I started having these conversations even before the George Floyd incident was because I get so emotional and I get so angry around the topic. And I think we have to all, from all backgrounds, all races, come to the table with grace and willing to listen and understand that if someone is at the table, even if they say something that we think is inappropriate, that they're there for a reason. And just to have grace all around. So that's what I think.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I am just thinking, like, as you were like, I have different groups, and I think of like every time you post something on Facebook and 8,000 people like it. Like Lindsay is someone who just cultivates friendships and relationships all over the place. You're such a model. But that's just wonderful and challenging to think about too, because you're specifically calling out like who are the people in your life who this would be difficult, who it would be uncomfortable to have the conversation with. And those are, right, probably exactly the people that it would be very beneficial to have the conversation with. So I appreciate that challenge. Jess, what are your thoughts on that question?
I think, again, I think we've touched on many of these already, but number one, like everyone has already mentioned, is one, just acknowledging the issue, acknowledging that racism exists. And then, and if you're not a person of color, if you haven't experienced it personally, to really listen to someone who says that they're experiencing it and believing them and not calling them a snowflake or trying to, discredit them. Just listen. And then from that place of listening to really just lament and grieve, with them. And part of that process for me has been, reading books. Like I'm reading this book called Rethinking Incarceration, Advocating for Justice That Restores. And it's really showed me how racism has harmed people of color for so long, and our systems are built to harm people of color. And just being aware of these truths that I wasn't aware of just makes me grieve with them. And the places where God's been able to change me the most is in those dark nights of the soul, like when I'm absolutely exhausted, crying, saying, God, my hands are thrown up into the sky, and God, I don't know what to do. Like something's got to change, but I'm powerless to do so. And it's in those moments that God really shows up. And I think we as churches really need to get to that place where we're so grieved by these things that we're throwing our hands up in the air and saying, God, we don't know what to do, but we need you to do something and show me what to do, show me that next step. And it's that in that humility and that space where God really can work, where we get out of our own way and God can really show up. So I think lament and grief and acknowledgement and listening are all key to bringing about change.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And Kathy, I don't know, I kind of started this question off because you sort of led us with what I thought was your answer, but I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to add to what you had said previously.
I always have quite a few words to say, but I literally am just the scripture that comes to mind. More of you, Lord, and less of me.
That's perfect. Thank you. All right, we have come to the end of our time, and I just want to, I think I've thanked you guys like 100 times like in this, but I can't, I'm just so really deeply thankful just for each of you existing and for your friendship and just for your willingness to share, for your sharing your experiences and your wisdom and the ways in which you've walked through what we've been going through as a country, as a church community, and personally. I think it is really a conversation that is so beneficial to people who are willing to engage with us. And so I'm just really thankful for your hearts for this and your willingness to just put it out there so that other people can engage and benefit from the wisdom that you guys bring to the table. So I'm very thankful. I just want to end by saying, I think in the chat, so we're over here on Zoom and over there on Facebook. I think Krista has been putting some of the links that that these ladies have been talking about. So if some of the books and the other things should be in there. And I also want to say that if you are interested in engaging in some of this stuff, the Boston Faith and Justice Network is going to be doing book club. I hesitate to call it a book club. That just sounds really trite. But a group discussion, a community engagement, which will be centered on a book. I've let a couple be The Bridges and Jamar Tisby's How to Be Anti-Racist, and we're going to be engaging with one of those. So if you're potentially interested in that, I would encourage you to sign up for our newsletter, and you can find out how we're doing that. It's just a way. We don't think book clubs are the answer, but as we've been talking about and engaging, just going deeper into these issues in community is a safe way to kind of process what's going on, to figure out where we're at and the ways in which we can then go out and engage with our communities. So these conversations are awesome and important, but a way to kind of go deeper in that is to do this in a community where we can then sort of talk back to each other. And I found those groups really helpful for me as a learner. And so if you're interested in that, again, you can always get in touch with me personally, but I would just encourage you to sign up for our newsletter so that you can figure out when we're doing that. And we can walk with you in that, because we're just really passionate about helping Christians find the ways in which they can engage and be doers of justice in the world, because we truly, truly believe that that's what God calls us to do, and that we are fulfilled, in who he made us to be when we're doing that. And also, I think it was Lindsay who was saying, and I love how you said this, that if we're all doing that work, then the work isn't so backbreaking for the people that are doing it, because that's God's vision for the world. I love that we are God's plan A for bringing about justice. There is no plan B. So when people ask, why is there so much injustice in the world if we serve a loving God, it's because God calls us to be the doers of justice. So anyway, that was a little side rant. And finally, the Boston Faith and Justice Network is a nonprofit, and we depend on donations from people to do stuff like this. And we love doing stuff like this because, again, we really feel like this is the work of the church and the work of the people of God. So if you feel so moved, we would love to have your support. Thank you, ladies, so much. I'm so thankful for each and every one of you. I'm thankful for everyone who engaged with us on Facebook. This will live on our Facebook page. So if you feel like someone would benefit from this conversation, aka everyone, send them over there and they can look at it. All right, everyone, have a great night.